It is some college football this weekend.
Yes, it is.
This is the home of the Ducks.
That it is.
You will be on the pregame show, and you're going to have all kinds of stats and info that you will not share with us.
That's not going to happen.
Because the pregame show gets everything. But big game, Boise State, Oregon.
Yeah.
The line, to use Vegas as a reference, is moving in Oregon's favor. They are 21.5-point favorites. It opened at 18.5. Ashton Jainty's coming in off 6 tutties in a monster game. He's, at the forefront of the Heisman conversation.
Dude ran wild.
And Oregon was weird in week 1 against Idaho. It is Friday. Where are you at on tomorrow night's tilt in Eugene?
Yeah, I don't know if the Vegas trends are calming me down or making me more nervous. I'm stuck in between the two of them. I think the game opened 18.5, 19, somewhere in that range.
18.5 officially.
And it has been bet all the way up to 20. It's north of 3 touchdowns now. So a lot of money this week has come in on Oregon. And that is both reassuring that people think that, okay, it was an aberration and they're going to bounce back. Also alarming of this many people are already jumping back on after they were ridiculed, rightfully so, for barely beating an FCS team on Saturday. I do think, look, last weekend was incredibly alarming, and your inability to run the football, the lack of push that you had up front, the lack of explosive plays, the penalties, the mental mistakes, there were too many red flags to even count from that game. I do think as the week has gone on, my pucker factor and fear factor has calmed a little bit. Now I'm still in a slight panic mode, but I largely am for every Oregon game, and I will be for every Oregon game the rest of the year. Next weekend when they play bad teams, it's just the way that I operate day in and day out.
Next weekend's game's fun.
You got a rivalry game next weekend. I have a hard time wrapping my head around Oregon might not be top of the echelon national championship good. Maybe they have a flaw here or a flaw there, or it is the offensive line or it's Gabriel, whatever, that keeps them from winning a national championship. That's a different conversation than saying you're going to struggle week in and week out to inferior opponents. And I just have a really hard time squaring that we were all, not just myself, we were all that wrong on our evaluation of this roster and the talent on this roster. I think the first quarter is massive for them tomorrow to just calm everybody down, to show that they have the ability to run the football, and to hit a big play or two. They didn't have a single run last week against Idaho that was longer than 20 yards. They only had a small number of completions that was longer than 20 yards. Almost zero explosive plays for that offense. It's inexcusable. And I have a hard time seeing with the talent on this roster, them go out and put that stinker up again.
So Lanning was on primetime yesterday, and you can find that interview at 1080thefan.com. He's on every Thursday at 4-ish. And he was asked kind of about, if you look at the stats and all of the numbers, looking at that score is weird.
Should have been a blowout based on the box score.
Well, that's a good, easy takeaway, I think, for you and I and everybody else to have. I thought his answer, the thing that I like about Lanning, I don't root for Oregon, but what I like about Lanning is he doesn't seem like this old red-ass coach who's just chewing guys, like Brian Kelly, banging tables and blaming people.
Not good enough.
You're $11 million a year coach, man. Look in the mirror. I like the accountability he holds, and he was red-hot pissed, but still went in the press conference and didn't throw a single thing under the bus. And yesterday was basically asked, hey, the numbers say that you should have won that game by a wide margin. And I loved his answer. The score is what the game was.
Yeah.
Point blank, yeah, sure, our stats were better. It was what it was. That's football. And I just like that. He it's not like he's going to come out yeah, we should have won by 50. But I just love that he's like, no, the score was a score. That was the game. The game was the game. It's pretty simple, man. We don't need to get more complicated and to say, I think the biggest thing for Oregon this weekend, aside from just winning, show you can run the football. And it's just really that cut and dry. If you can run the football and not have Noah Whittington averaging 1.9 yards per carry and be, above 2.9, I think everybody breathed a sigh of relief. Now, if your defense is going to get gashed by Ashton Jainty and Boise State, that'll be a different conversation. But that wasn't the problem last weekend.
No.
It was the push up front with the run game and primarily with one back in because Jordan James's averages were okay. Run the football. You talk about explosive plays. Yeah, have 15, 20-yard runs. Be the team that many thought you were going into the year. and show us if last week was just a weird, there's message board stuff out there about were they sick, were they hungover? I don't know any of that. But that's a conclusion that you draw to when you see them play that poorly on the offensive line against that team.
I'm curious from both your perspectives. Does a quarterback need to be more of a threat to run, let alone run more?
He had some moments, they noted it on the broadcast late in that game where it was like he could have pulled that down and ran for 6 to 10 yards, but he would throw a ball and he didn't have very many incompletions, but he'd miss it. And I thought that was a good point, and that was something we talked about a little bit going into the year was Bo clearly had a thing with the coaching staff of last year. I'm not going to get hurt, okay? I'll be great, and he was great. I'm wondering, given this is Dillon Gabriel's only year, is there a reluctance to want to run and get hit, or is that just maybe just game one and we're wondering, but he'll use his legs more?
Yeah, that to me is more the latter. Dillon Gabriel to me is not in that same line of I'm playing to be a first-round NFL draft pick. Bo Nix had that potential. Dillon Gabriel is a great college quarterback. I don't know what his skills are at the next level. And I think he's going to do whatever it takes to win this year. To me, that gets back to the conversation that you have in opening weeks of how much are you holding close to the vest and how much are you unveiling. And if I go into that game if I'm Will Stein playing Idaho, I am calling 0 quarterback design runs. 0. Because, one, you shouldn't need him to win the game. Now it ended up being more uncomfortable than you wanted it to be. But I'm not going to risk getting my $3 million transfer quarterback injured against an FCS team in the first week of the year because somebody lands on him weird because I called his own read and he decided to pull it. I'm not risking that. So I would be shocked if he does not run the football this weekend. The ones that you pointed to, and this is where I'd be fascinated to talk to him about it, he had opportunities where he moved up in the pocket and there were gaps. And those were his decisions to not run the football.
To throw him.
But I think this, to Swag's question, is there will be a big part of their offense, and it was at Oklahoma. The design quarterback runs will be a part of the Oregon offense this year. I just think that was a case of we're not unveiling that against Idaho. We shouldn't have to. And I think you'll see more of that as the season goes on. I'm also glad you brought up Noah Whittington because when you dive deeper into the numbers, I've rewatched the game 3 times now. I'm a sicko. I do think this is something.
Sir, can I have another?
This is something to keep an eye on, though, because Jordan James did not have a dominant game, but he was fine. He averaged 5-6 yards a carry. He was fine. He was not the issue. He did get tackled by the turf monster too many times, he'll fix that. Noah Whittington is coming off of a devastating injury last year. And we just got done with this conversation about Mark Andrews in game 1 last night. Coming off a bad injury. How's he go? Game 1s are always a little weird for these guys. First game back, you're probably not 100% confident.
You don't want to take a hit.
I don't want to get hit. Am I going to hurt again? Can I cut this quick? Watching what he looks like in game 2, and if that problem lingers and James is averaging 5, 6, 7 yards a carry, they bring in Whittington. He's a step slower. He's not cutting the way that he should, and it's 2 or 3 yards a carry. Oregon has a lot of depth behind him. Jaden Lamar is a guy that everybody's really high on and had played a lot as a freshman last year. I don't believe he had a single carry in the game this past weekend. Does that become something that you pivot? And he ends up getting some of those number 2 carries behind Jordan James because Whittington just isn't there yet. I'm going to give him time. I'm rooting like hell for the kid, but he was not at 100% last week, and that cannot be something that you let linger all year.
We'll get to the Bees eventually. I got a couple little things I want to – you pointed there, and I wanted to kind of carry over to the other side. Also just noting, is Jordan James more of a workhorse than splitting up the reps evenly between him and another back? I think that's another interesting part of this. He had 95 yards at a 6.3-yard average on 15 carries. If Whittington is sitting with what you're saying, some uncomfortableness coming back from a massive injury.
I think it's just maybe confidence, too. Just not confident in the knee yet.